The Australian government's new social media ban for under 16s has come into full effect. But are the new laws working? Are there massive loopholes just waiting to be exploited? Is it just another reason for the government to pat itself on the back and tell each other that they're doing a good job, quote-unquote, protecting the children from the hostile cesspool of the internet? Or are the laws just about control and the illusion of protecting children online? Or are there more conspiratorial angles to this? The internet is not a new thing, so why now? These are some of the questions I will attempt to answer. Good evening, you're listening to The Truth Tank and I'm your host, The Tank. If this is your first time listening to The Truth Tank, a big welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. So, we're into the first months of 2026. Hopefully the world won't end this year, but can't promise anything these days. If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you would have seen a post I posted a couple of days ago at time of recording about the episode lineup I have planned for 2026. If you haven't seen the post, some of the episodes I have planned for this year are The Bondi Massacre, Part 2, which has been out for a while at this point, Avatar Fire and Ash Review, The Lie of Communism Chapter 3, Ding Dong Oscar's Dead 5, Frankenstein Review, The Psychology of Frankenstein and the Life of Mary Shelley, The Fall of Rome and the Decline of Western Civilization, The Silent War, Faith Under Fire, A History of Bioweapons Part 5, World War II, The Epstein Files, American Caligula, Parts 1 to 10. This is a very big podcast series I'm working on. It's going to be multiple parts. It might be more than 10 by the time I'm finished with it. I've been wanting to cover the Epstein case for a while, but there hasn't really been a hell of a lot of information, new information, until recently. So I am going to be doing a very deep, dark, and detailed dive into the Epstein Files and that whole disturbing clusterfuck. That will be an entire series. I'm not sure if I'm going to release them all at once or break them up over the course of the year and going into next year. Next one is the Odyssey Film Review and History, followed by, and I have been wanting to cover this for a very long time, it's been planned for about 2 years now, Eyes Wide Shut Review and the Kubrick Conspiracy. I brought Eyes Wide Shut a while ago. I wanted to do a review on it, but I think there's a lot more to that story than meets the eye. That's just some of the episodes I'll be covering this year and probably going into next year, as well as many more. There'll also be other film reviews scattered in throughout the year. June Part 3 will be one of them. So will the Mandalorian movie. There's a few other episodes I've been working on, as well as special guest episodes. I've been meaning to have guests on for a long time. I'm also probably going to be starting an X account this year as well. It's been long overdue too. Time gets away from you. Yeah, I put so much into researching the topics for this show, I kind of lose track of the management and promotion side of things. So this episode was not included on that list, but it's a topic I've wanted to cover since the new laws passed in December of 2025. A lot of shit has happened in Australia since then. We've had the Bondi Massacre, the new draconian hate speech laws that have come into effect. There's been a lot of shit to cover politically. There's a lot of stuff to catch up on and read through and do my homework on. And then on top of that, I've had the Epstein files have been released. There's been 2 batches of them so far and everything else that's happened in the world. So it's been a very action-packed start to the year and the end of last year. I'm recording this on the 28th of February. It's officially the last day of summer where I am. It's been raining overnight quite a lot. It's been raining on and off. It is humid as fuck. It's usually dry where I am, but it is humid. I am sweating bullets while I'm recording this. The window is a little open, otherwise I'd probably pass out from the heat. So if you do hear some background noise, it's probably because the window's a little bit open, so I do apologise for that. But I am raining fucking sweat. My singlet is soaked through, and I've only been recording for 12 minutes. My armpits are just dripping sweat. I got sweat on my shoulders, sweat running down my legs, my forehead. My headband's fucking wet. If you can hear something in the background, it is just started pouring with rain where I am. It seems every time I record, it's either pouring down with rain or it is really fucking hot. And I can't have a fan on because it ruins the recording. And I don't have an air conditioner in this room, so I just have to suck it up and put up with the heat. The things we do for our art. So without further ado, this is episode 94 of the Truth Tank. Australia's under 16 social media ban, protection, control or illusion. Australia has become the first country in the world to ban social media for anyone under 16 years of age. Millions of accounts seemingly disappeared overnight, but within weeks teenagers had already found ways around it. As should be expected, whenever bans or rules like this come in, there's always ways around it, and teenagers are usually the ones that find and probe the loopholes in laws and rules like this. I'm kind of on the fence when it comes to these new laws, because on the one hand, I don't think anyone under 18 should be using social media. I think it's poisonous, it is corrosive to people's intelligence, especially young people. I know plenty of adults who will just doom scroll for 10, 15, 20 minutes, which turns into half an hour, which turns into an hour, and you're just wasting your life looking at pointless shit after pointless shit. And teenagers are no exception to this. I guess the difference is if you're under 18 years old, you aren't legally classed as an adult, and your brain isn't fully developed, and social media, especially for under 16s, can be very influential and very impactful, especially on young girls. So there is that argument that under 16s probably shouldn't be using it. But the bigger picture that no one likes to deal with is how do the kids get the phones in the first place? Unless you're 18 years old, you can't really sign up for a mobile phone plan. These kids all have smartphones, so someone's obviously buying them. They don't have jobs, so that comes down to the parents buying the kids a phone and then signing them up for a plan or prepaid, whatever it happens to be. Yet no one wants to call out the parents and say why you're buying them the phones in the first place. And yeah, there's that peer pressure side of things that everyone at school's got a phone and you don't want to be the odd one out. And we're living in this day and age where there are so many more threats now. I remember when I was at school, there was one guy that had a mobile phone. It was some very primitive early Nokia. Pretty sure he had a prepaid plan, a very early one. It was about $30. And he would show it off at school. Every couple of months he would seem to have a new phone. I think one got broken, so we got another one, and we were all gathered around this guy like, whoa, look at this amazing fucking technology. This guy's got a phone. Wow, I've never seen one before. You can make calls in recess and lunchtime, and that's what we did. We would make prank calls. Well, he would, and we would use all his phone credit, which backfired on him. All of a sudden, he's this popular kid because he's got the phone. He was a bit of a wanker, so don't feel too sorry for him. He had a lot of money, and he'd always have the new latest gadget. He'd turn up with like a new watch or the fancy shoes. He was a bit of a tool. He also loved the attention and the fact that people were just following him around because he had the phone. He had the cool technological gadget. He loved the attention. That attention did backfire because we would burn through his prepaid credit in about 2 days. And this is back in when was this? I'm showing my age now. This was the early 2000s, so phone plans weren't as good as they are today. Well, I don't think they're that good today. I think they're a bit of a rip-off. They suck you in with the data and you don't get a lot else for it. But back then it was pretty expensive. I think it was around $1 a minute or something. So we'd make these short prank calls and he would be paying for it later on. Or I guess his parents would pay for it. So fast forward 15 to 20 years and it seems like every school kid has got a mobile phone. And as I just said, phones were rare when I was at school, but as the years went by, more and more kids got phones as they became cheaper and more accessible, and they became trendy and more socially acceptable. I don't think I got a phone until I was working at Macca's. I definitely didn't have a phone at school. I reckon I had a phone in my first or second year at work because I had to call parents for pickups and things like that, and it was just more convenient rather than trying to find a payphone. And back then, payphones were still around, not like today where they're few and far between. So this problem has been around for quite a while. It's been around for pretty much it's been growing since about 2001, 2002. Realistically, any type of controls to stop this from becoming a massive social problem would have been probably 10 years ago. And now that social media has become such a global force in the last 10 to 15 years, the real dark side of social media has become more apparent. I've been saying this for fucking years that social media was a bad influence. It's not good for people in the long run. I was a very late adopter of Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, they're great for running a podcast and a business, but if you are just following creators and accounts, your thinking can become very skewed to one side of a political debate or an opinion, an influencer, whatever it happens to be. And the influencer one is the one I really find interesting because you have these people that have absolutely no credibility in what they're trying to talk about or push, yet they're telling you to go out and snort cinnamon. I think the latest challenge now is buying this particular brand of yogurt and those Biscoffee biscuits, crushing them up and putting them in the yogurt. Like these influencers are the first people to ever think about crushing up biscuits and putting them in yogurt. They've had those flip yogurts for like 25 years now. I remember getting them when I was a kid. So the influencers can fuck right off with your crushed biscuits in your yogurt. Most influencers are either just recycling things that have been forgotten or coming up with stupid, retarded shit like washing a chicken in bleach to get rid of the germs. You're coming up with completely moronic shit that is not backed or checked by any type of medical or scientific fucking knowledge. So yeah, there is a danger, especially with young girls being influenced by people who really have no right influencing people in any way, shape or form. But to outrightly ban social media, I think also has negative effects. And I don't think those effects are really going to be known until for a couple of years. There's going to be lots of teenagers with withdrawal problems. But at the same time, why is the government doing it now? If you've listened to me for any number of years, you'll know that I like to view things not as coincidental. Everything happens for a reason, and everything is connected. And I don't think this is any different. But I'll get into the conspiracy side of things a little later. So the real question isn't whether the laws exist, it's whether the laws can actually work. So on this episode, I'll be breaking down what the law actually is, why it is introduced, what platforms are included on the banned and censored list and which ones aren't, how age verification really works, why critics say it's very easy to bypass. I'll also be looking at the porn site verification contradiction and some of the darker parts of the internet, why this might have been introduced now as opposed to 10 years ago, and how it links to global trends and the regulation of free speech. So let's start with the basics, because there's a lot of people arguing about these laws, but they don't actually know what the law does. What the law actually is. So the Online Safety Amendment to the Social Media Minimum Age Act of 2024, it was passed by the Albanese government, or should I say Commissar Anthony Albanese's government, and was made effective December 2025. It's the first national law of its kind, and I'm pretty sure we're the first country to introduce a social media ban, which only history will tell if that was a good thing or a bad thing. At this stage, I'm kind of leaning more towards it being a good thing, because I guess it's going to get kids going outside and going back into nature and not spending all their waking hours doom scrolling and obsessing about pointless shit online. I guess the biggest benefit I can see is it will eliminate a lot of online bullying, because I guess because a lot of these kids can't use social media to bully their friends or classmates or people at school all they know. Some key clarifications. So the kids and parents are not being punished under the new laws. The responsibility falls back on the social media platforms. Companies must prevent under 16s from holding accounts. If they're found guilty of violating these laws, they can be fined up to $49.5 million. That's a pretty big fine, but a lot of these tech companies, especially the social media companies like Facebook and Instagram, generate billions of dollars. So is it going to be like the environmental fines a lot of these massive oil companies face? Are they just going to pay the fine and carry on and not bother doing anything about it because it's cheaper to take the fine than it is to invest the time and resources into changing the system? And then how do you prove that it was the social media company that allowed an under 16 to create an account? Because as we'll see later in the episode, it is pretty easy to bypass some of the age verification techniques on social media and other sites. So this is a quote that relates to the government framing why they brought these laws into play. It comes from the Australian Science Media Centre. Quote, "The aim of this ban is to protect young people from design features that encourage them to spend too much time on screens and show them content that can be harmful to their health and well-being." Fair enough, pretty good argument. As we all know, and I have talked about this many times before, the algorithms they try to dictate what you look at. And look, social media would be much better if there wasn't this poisonous algorithm trying to tell you what you should watch or engage with. If they fuck the algorithm off from the internet altogether, it'd be a much better, safer, and happier place. And this is something I found in modern podcasting. The algorithms have taken over. Well, they've become more prevalent, especially on certain podcast platforms, YouTube being a big one. If you don't have the right keywords and the right SEO and the right description and the right hashtags, it may minimize your reach, which is really fucking annoying, because as a podcaster, you invest hundreds of hours researching, recording, editing, making artwork and doing descriptions and titles, uploading, releasing, and then promoting a show. It's a fucking full-time job with no pay. And in recent years, I have noticed it's become really fucking annoying, and algorithms play a more central role in the podcasting experience. And it's something that I've looked into quite a lot over the past several years. It's really fucking annoying too, because you constantly second guess yourself. If I put this keyword or this title in, will that maximize the reach, rather than just focusing on the art of the podcast? Rather than just being yourself, expressing yourself and your ideas, you're always thinking about the technical side of things to maximize your reach. Do I do this? Do I change my fucking artwork? Do I add this hashtag or this description? if I put this in the title, is that likely to get blocked or shadow banned by fucking YouTube or something like that? So if you took that out of social media, it would be a lot less harmful. But for whatever reason, that's how these social media companies and, well, pretty much how the entire internet seems to work. Even on places like eBay, this is how things work. You look up one thing, then all of a sudden you're being suggested a million of the same things you've just looked at. Like, I look at a lot of guitars on eBay recently, and guess what's in my feed? Guitars, and more guitars. Which is not a bad thing, because it's what I want to look at, and it helps you find them, because search engines are pretty retarded. You search for a very specific thing, and it doesn't really render too many results. Like, I was looking at 7-string Schecter guitars on eBay. I come up with a couple of them, and then, like, there'll be, like, the first 3 listings will be 7-string, 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 and then it'll just be a random 6-string. I'm like, well, if I wanted a 6-string, I would have fucking searched for a 6-string. I was very specific, saying Schecter 7-string electric guitar. It's pretty basic what I'm searching for. It's not like I was looking for one that was made out of some exotic wood or had a certain type of hardware or something like that. Now, whether that's just to fill up the listing page in the hopes that you're gonna click and look at the listing and buy it, who the fuck knows? But it is annoying. Like, if I wanted a 6-string, I would search for a 6-string. Kind of lost the train of thought. I don't even really know what the point I was trying to make with that. Must be affected by the heat already. But the point is, like, if you fuck the algorithm off, social media and the internet would be a far better place. Now, the government loves to miss the mark. It does it on a lot of things, so why don't they put more pressure on the social media companies about banning or changing algorithms? Maybe about being more upfront with algorithms, because we all know algorithms react to negativity. They react to negative comments because more people are likely to react and engage with negative content than they are positive. It's a well-known fact, and it's one that is not a big secret anymore. The social media companies have admitted it. But the other side of that, especially on social media sites such as Facebook and Instagram, I mean, how harmful can the content really be? I mean, I search for very specific things. I keep it pretty business focused. I haven't seen anything really too bad on Instagram. Well, up until recently anyway, because when you add to a story, well, when it's like one of those big template stories, and you add a picture to it, and it has like millions of views, so you think, oh well, if I just promote something on here, I add a picture, then more accounts will view me and will follow. Doesn't always work like that. I found a lot of those fake accounts that people have joined Instagram in the last couple of days that don't have a picture profile, and it's just a bunch of like random letters and words. There's been a lot of pornographic content that I have found on Instagram. And these accounts usually get banned pretty quickly, but the problem is they still exist for a long enough period, whether it be a day or a week, that people can be exposed to it. And if you are a minor, yes, I guess that is a massive problem, because you don't want your kids looking at that type of shit, especially on what is supposed to be viewed as a safe social media site like Instagram. And it's not just Instagram either. I'm just using that as an example. The other problem is there's a lot of car crash videos and other violent content on there as well. Whether it gets banned after a certain point of time, I don't know, or it gets censored. But it's the stuff that a lot of sick people do engage with. And if that is what your feed is made up of, I think you probably need some counselling. It's not exactly the most healthiest thing to be engaging with. The Instagram is great if you're just looking at the normal type of stuff, but it has been so infected with OnlyFans models pushing smut, a lot of extremists groups, and a lot of other retard influencers and everybody in between. I would say that 75% of it, in my experience, has been pretty positive, and obviously that's just my experience, but I guess your algorithm reflects you at the end of the day, and it reflects what's inside, I guess, and what your outlook is. I just think people probably need to be a bit more moral when it comes to using social media, maybe a bit more responsible. But if you're under 16 years old, you can't really expect someone with an underdeveloped brain to be that responsible when they're still trying to learn and their brain is still growing and figuring things out. So why didn't Instagram and Facebook come up with like a kids version the same way YouTube has? Because YouTube is a similar thing. While a lot of violent and pretty over-the-top content does get removed, it's the timing and how long it takes that is probably the real problem. And the other problem too, this is more of the conspiratorial side of how I think coming through, but I'm 100% certain that a lot of these sites will leave this type of stuff up because it gets clicks and because it generates outrage. It generates comments, which drives the algorithm, which is good for profit. Negativity sells, and it's the same trick that newspapers have been using for like 100 years. The most outrageous headlines sell papers. No one's going to buy a paper that has some generic, weak, fluffy title like Brisbane Lions win grand final. The more catchier title that's probably guaranteed to sell papers is Brisbane Lions massacre cats in bloodbath of a grand final. 64 to 150, or whatever the title happens to be. Tabloid newspapers have done this better than anyone. And it's a similar thing with internet algorithms. It's basically the same thing, just in this weird, invisible algorithmic code that exists online. And that's the other problem with social media, is they will ban someone they think is spreading fake news or harmful content. If it's a news article or a quote or whatever it happens to be, a video, they'll say, this is being fact-checked, and do you want to see this? And they blur it out. And then you click yes, and it shows you whatever it is, and it's usually a differing opinion to the mainstream narrative. I've seen that blurred out image thing on images as well, usually violent ones, like relating to war and global conflicts, which is a good thing, but at the same time, a 16-year-old can just press see reel or see post. So you're not really protecting anybody by having a smokescreen. It's too easy to get around. Now, if it's an under 16 account, then maybe the algorithm should be tailored to not showing any type of content like that at all. But as I just mentioned, when you add a picture to a template on Instagram and it's got 6 million people who have used it, and there's a lot of fake or a lot of unsavory accounts, and yeah, look, if it is like a hypersexual content creator or OnlyFans creator, that brings up the other question: do they have the right to use Instagram? Yeah, okay, I'd say yeah, they should, but at the same time, they shouldn't be able to be seen by everybody, especially if you're not into that type of thing or you find that offensive. I mean, I could do a whole episode on what I think of OnlyFans models, influencers, whatever the fuck you want to call them, sluts, whores, parasites, digital prostitutes, whatever term you want to use for them. But at the same time, social media should be for everybody. Now, going back to what I said when I was looking at how many people were viewing my story, I'd scroll down, you see all these accounts with no image, and even the ones that do have an image, you'd click on them and all of a sudden it's some dude twirling his fucking 9-inch cock around. Your first reaction is, well, what the fuck? I didn't think that was supposed to be on Instagram. And yeah, it might get deleted after a certain amount of time, but that's the problem, is you don't really want your 12-year-old child looking at some dude twirling his cock around. That's not really appropriate for anybody. Unless you're into that type of thing. If you're into that, more power to you, but for the sake of having a safe digital environment, that shouldn't be allowed. And if you agree and say that should be allowed, then maybe there should be an adults-only Instagram. It shouldn't always exist in the same ecosystem. I'll go back to eBay. eBay, everyone knows it's a big online marketplace. You can buy kids' toys and clothes, you can buy guitars, you can buy pretty much anything, collectibles, but you can also buy sex toys. They exist in the same ecosystem, but they're aimed at very different customer bases. It's a lot safer, it's more directed, and while the search engine isn't perfect, it does give you the closest match to whatever it is you're searching for. And I think it does a better job at protecting people from seeing things they might find offensive. You really have to be looking to find sex toys or anything like that, and they do have a policy with no pornography, I think, unless it's Playboy or something like that. So you can still sell Playboys and penthouses and DVDs and things like that, but I think it has to be more like official, which at the same time I don't have a problem with as long as it's all above board. And at the same time, if someone is offended by that, then that shouldn't just be popping up on the daily featured items or something like that. And in my experience, that hasn't been the case. Like, eBay is usually pretty safe. It just gives you what you look at. So if you are searching for dildos, that's probably what you're going to find. For me, I get a lot of leather jackets and guitars because that's what I'm looking for most of the time, and boots. That's a very long-winded example. But going back to the original question, so the aim of the ban is to protect young people. So sounds straightforward, sounds all good in theory, until you look at what is actually included in these new laws. So what's banned and what's not? The list of banned, censored, restricted, unauthorized, exiled social media platforms include, and this is no surprise, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, X, Reddit, Threads, Twitch, Kick, and there's probably a few others. X, okay, that one makes sense because it's pretty much the Wild West. There's a lot of offensive people on there. Lots of adult content too, lots of violent content. It's pretty much the Wild West in terms of social media. YouTube, yeah, there's a lot of documentaries that look at the darker side of life, but it's pretty mundane by internet standards, I'd say. I mean, I find a lot of useful things on YouTube. There's a lot of opinions and things like that, but that should exist because you need to hear alternative perspectives and views. Anything too extreme or too violent or sexualized is usually removed. Unless it's a music video, then that seems to be okay. TikTok, well, you know my opinions on that. That is probably the most influential and corrupting to young people. I mean, a couple of years ago, I was out with my partner and we were walking around and we saw two or three, probably like 14-year-old girls like dancing around, and I'm thinking, what the fuck are they doing? And she goes, they're making a TikTok video because it's a new dance trend. I'm like, really, that's what young people are doing with their time, is making stupid dance videos to put on TikTok because the world needs more dancing morons. And you can make the argument that all these platforms are helping to dumb down Western society to make us complacent, distracted, and stupid, while the globalist agenda takes over, and we're too distracted to do anything about it. And TikTok's origins too are also very controversial. Are they owned by the Chinese Communist Party? Are they not? Is it just a massive communist psyop to keep Westerners distracted? Because apparently the Chinese TikTok focuses more on education than it does on pointless shit. And a lot of people do get their information from TikTok, which I think if that's really the sole source of information you're getting, probably really broaden your horizons. And I think that's where a lot of the problems with social media does arise, is lots of adults, lots of kids, lots of people in between are getting their information solely off of social media, and they're not really investigating or doing their own critical thinking or analysis into a subject. A lot of people are getting the news just from Facebook or Instagram and taking that as gospel, when most of the time it is very skewed. And this is something I found regarding the Epstein files in recent weeks. I've seen a lot of fake emails from Epstein. It's not exactly the hardest thing to try to manipulate. There's a lot of fake ones out there. There's a picture of Trump with his daughter, and I've seen a photoshopped version of that where they put another child in there, and they're trying to make it sound like he had something to do with nefarious goings on at the island, but it was a picture of his daughter, Ivanka, when she was like 10 or 11. So it is very easy to manipulate things digitally, and if you are just looking into the Epstein files via Instagram or Facebook, it becomes very fucked up very quickly. It is fucked up, I'm not denying it's not. But there's 6 million fucking emails out there, and a lot of it is coded language. A lot of it is very mundane. I've seen a lot of pretty basic, boring stuff between these two, like what restaurant are we going to? Yeah, cool, pick you up here at this time. The Tom Hanks one I find probably the most interesting. I've heard lots of reports that he's allegedly a pedophile, but I did look into the Epstein files about Tom Hanks, and I didn't have time to go through all of them. A lot of the ones I did find were people emailing about Tom Hanks movies. I think Epstein was trying to buy a fucking Wilson volleyball with a hand paint on it. Things like that. There was nothing. I couldn't actually find much from Tom Hanks himself. I don't even know if they've ever even met. And that's the problem with conspiracies is it's so easy to connect the dots with things like that. If you're only getting your information off of a couple of sources, then that frames your worldview and your knowledge base on a subject. And the same is true for every one of those social media ecosystems. They become echo chambers and they just reinforce what you want to hear rather than giving you the truth. Because like I said before, the negativity sells. The algorithm runs on negative interaction and engagement. And look, like, I love conspiracy theories, but I think people really need to do their research into them. Because I think fact is always stranger than fiction. And I'm not fucking saying Epstein isn't guilty. He's 100% guilty. He's one of the fucking most evil men that's ever lived. I'm not sure it's as black and white as people are making it out to be. I think it is much more complex. And I don't think we'll ever understand really what he was up to and how deep the rabbit hole goes. And yet it is very easy to tie certain celebrities back to events like that because they're just mentioned in the files. Because so many people are saying, oh, so-and-so is mentioned in the files. Thousands of people are mentioned in the files. He wanted to contact anyone famous, probably to see who he could corrupt. This is something I'll be getting into in a lot more detail in the Epstein files, American Caligula, later in the year. That also ties back to, was he working for an intelligence agency? Because Ghislaine Maxwell's father had ties to Mossad and the KGB and MI5. That doesn't mean that he did. It is the easiest dot to connect, I guess. But at the same time, I really like to think the CIA, at least, if they knew he had gone that far off the reservation, would have done something about him. Would they have blown up the island, or would he get 2 bullets in the back of the head and they find him floating off Little St. James Island a few days later? I'd like to think that they would have put down a sick dog if they knew what he was really doing. And that's the same thing. Was he working for an intelligence agency? Yep, there was probably some connection there because that's what it looks like. But was he just saying that for intimidation because billionaires don't want the government looking into what they're doing? Because they all seem to be a little dodgy at the end of the day. Not all of them, but that's what it seems like. And yeah, look, I've heard so many people say, no, Trump shouldn't be president because he's a sex offender, yada, yada, yada. He went to the island. There's no record of him going to the island. He goes to Florida, but he lives in Florida, and Trump was the guy that turned him in. He was the one that contacted the FBI about him and wanted him shut down. No other billionaire did that. Trump was the one that had him arrested at Mar-a-Lago for inappropriately touching or interacting with the daughter of one of his mates. And it is such a complex thing. Like there's so much information in the files. It's almost like information overload, but at the same time, there's also a lack of key information. Like, what the fuck was Jerky referring to? Was it some type of satanic cult? Were they eating kids? Who the fuck knows? But more investigation probably needs to be done. The Pizzagate, same thing. It's like, what the fuck was actually going on? Like, how many of these groups are there? Is it individual groups, or is it some type of larger organization? Who the fuck knows? And when you look at conspiracies, a lot of conspiracy theorists have been proven right, because a lot of conspiracy nuts have been saying for years that Epstein had an island and he would take underage girls and minors there, and all these elites would come and do inappropriate things, and then he would blackmail them later on. And that fucking turned out to be 100% true. I remember hearing about fucking Epstein back in 2010 when he got arrested and indicted. I saw that on the fucking news. And while like this is kind of before I had access to a smartphone and the internet, I remember hearing about it every once in a while. And then a couple of years ago, it became more prevalent when the Epstein file were being circulated around online, and people saying, release the files, who else is on these lists. This is something that was like I knew about ages ago, because I remember seeing police footage from his house where he had destroyed all the hard drives, or all the hard drives had been taken out of the computer and they mysteriously disappeared, and safes were emptied. And then he was arrested a couple of days later. And I don't think he went to jail that time. I think that came later on. And then he was arrested in, 2018, 2019, and then he mysteriously suicides. But more on that in the Epstein Files, American Caligula. So conspiracies are proven right in those instances, but if you are getting all your information about history or conspiracy or news and current events from Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, then you are only getting one side of the story, and that is the problem. So what social media sites aren't included in the ban? And this one is pretty surprising. I think this one's actually more surprising than the platforms that are banned. Discord isn't banned, which is really surprising, because if any platform should be banned, it should be fucking Discord. That place is a cesspool of fucking sickos. It's widely known that pedophiles and sick fucks hang out on Discord and try to corrupt young people and contact them. It's been widely reported, especially in the last couple of months. So next up is WhatsApp. That one's a little surprising, because I guess you could be lured off of social media into contacting someone on WhatsApp or Messenger for inappropriate means. But at the same time, it is more so a messenger service than anything. It's not really a social media site, so I can kind of see why that wasn't banned. But at the same time, if the government is really just going after the generic default definition of social media, then I think they are fucking retarded. Minors can be very easily contacted and lured off sites on Discord, WhatsApp, and Messenger. There's been many criminal organizations that have used WhatsApp, and it is an encrypted messenger service. So next on the list is, unsurprisingly, Messenger. And I'm pretty sure there's a Messenger Kids. This is a bit more of a personal story. My partner and I have been dealing with her narcissistic partner for the past 3 years. He is an absolute fucking cunt and one of the worst human beings I have ever had the misfortune to come across. And this is a story I would like to tell, but I'm just kind of looking for the outlet to tell it. I don't think it really fits my show. Long story short, he manipulated his own daughter into leaving with him and living with him for 6 weeks. He more or less abducted her. She came home with an iPad one night and then sent the distress call. He came and picked her up and said, I promise I'll bring her back by Monday. Then it was Tuesday. Then it was, hi, I'm not bringing her back at all, yada, yada, yada. And then we had to take him to court. The judge said, you bring her back by 2 o'clock today, drop her off at the police station, or SAPOL will go and get her, and you'll be pretty much dragged in for questioning. So a 3-year legal fight, a very expensive one. So if you want to support the Truth Tank, please go buy some merch, because we have burnt through about $100,000 fighting this fucking piece of shit. So any type of financial support you could show this show would be greatly appreciated. I suspect he did most of this because when I started seeing my partner, he wasn't really around. They had a daughter that lived with the mother. I was obviously the new father figure on the block, I guess, and became quite close with my partner's daughter. We would do a lot of things together. We would all go out as a group, and she started spending more time with us and less time with him. But this wasn't really like some overarching plan that we had. He would not show up, and that's why I had to step up, because he couldn't. There was a 6-week period where he saw her, I think it was 2 Saturdays. Every other Saturday he was sick. He had a sore neck, or he even tried to use the excuse that he thought he had testicular cancer and he couldn't see her, or we were scratching our heads going, are you fucking real? Like, maybe you should go to a doctor if you've got fucking ball cancer. He didn't have it, so I don't feel sorry for this fucking piece of shit whatsoever. His default excuse was he'd have tooth pain, which once again, tooth pain is not really something you want to let go. Maybe go to the dentist. It was always tooth pain, or he had a sore neck. And she would get dressed up nice for him. He would come pick her up from the house. I'd go around there because we were doing something that day. We were either going to the movies or doing whatever it is that we were doing. And then I'd hear the phone ring. And then she'd go into another room, and then I'd say to the daughter, so what else would you like to do today? She goes, I'm going to see my dad today. And I would try to let her down easy and say, well, what if you aren't seeing your dad today? What else would you like to do? He goes, oh, well, we could go to a park. We could get some ice cream, something like that. I said, okay, well, maybe we should do that. Then my partner would come out of the other room and go, sorry, your dad's not well, he can't see you today. And then she started hanging out with us, and that became basically a routine. And I think he got very jealous of that. He wanted sleepovers. He didn't have any legal grounds to do much about it. He meets this disgusting ham beast, I'll call her, who had 4 kids with 4 different fathers, who I'm pretty convinced told him to enact this plan to get her away to go live with them so they could collect more money from NDIS. She has 2 autistic children. They're not very autistic, but she gets a lot of NDIS money. I don't think she works. She volunteers. She has 2 older daughters. One of them moved out and lived with the father, who had, I think, just recently been released out of prison because he was more stable than the mother and this new partner that the daughters don't seem to get along with. There was an older daughter that made police reports against this piece of shit for getting physical with the 2 autistic boys, so that's the type of man that you're dealing with. So anyway, this does relate to Messenger. So he gave the iPad, got her this way of communicating, so these 2 would communicate via iMessage or Messenger, whatever it was. Then all of a sudden we find this message on Messenger Kids from the father's friend. This dude's a weirdo too. He's got some interesting fetishes from what I hear. He was talking to the daughter on Messenger Kids, and we were kind of like looking at each other like, what the fuck is this guy doing talking to your daughter on Messenger Kids? What the fuck's he doing on Messenger Kids for? Stop, this guy is not married, he doesn't have any kids. It seemed really fucking sus. So WhatsApp and Messenger should probably be included in the banned platforms, because it is very easy for fucking creeps and sickos to contact kids via these apps, platforms, whatever you want to call them. And just before I move on to the next point, the father and the new partner, this is getting a little off topic, but this is something that we've been dealing with for 3 years, because he also manipulated her into believing that she was a boy, and then this whole trans issue came up. They try to convince her that she was trans, probably so they can get more NDIS money, because neither of these 2 work. By them putting that idea into her head, confused her more than she already was. She still struggles with it. She does still think she's trans, and it's something that she is seeing counsellors for about, well, not just that, but everything that's happened to her in the last 3 years. So in other words, he used his own daughter to pretty much get money, more or less. That's the only reason I can see why he would have done this. And to get back at the mother and to get control. He's also being diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, which he likes to deny. He also apparently is schizophrenic. He is a long-time drug addict. He heard voices that tell him to harm himself and others. This is all on his medical report that the judges didn't really seem to care too much about. And then there's the multiple police reports made by the daughter and the neighbours about this guy's violent behaviour around the kids. So I'm not surprised that more women and children aren't murdered in this country, because they're not really dealing with the root cause of the problems. And the whole system, especially in Australia, and I know throughout the Western world, is completely fucked. Like, people like this can just get away with so much. The good, honest people have to spend $100,000 to go fight pieces of shit like this in court, only to have to arrive at a 50-50 settlement. And this guy will explode one day and go over the top. He's already been to jail once for unpaid parking tickets. It's only a matter of time before this guy explodes and takes it out on the kids, and someone gets really fucking hurt. So I am surprised that WhatsApp and Messenger aren't included, because pieces of shit like him and his weirdo friend who hangs out in Messenger Kids can use these apps and can influence, manipulate, and coerce minors. And they can do it pretty easily. Now, I don't know what the friend was doing on iKids. As I said, he doesn't have kids, so there was no good reason for him to be there. What the fuck's he doing? It seemed very... It was actually really disturbing and concerning that someone could contact a minor so easily. And like, we didn't even know about it until we happened to stumble across the message. So it's not easy trying to be a mother these days. There's so many influences to look out for, and I think technology has made it way too fucking easy for creeps and these fucking pedo freaks to coerce, influence, and manipulate minors and contact them. It's completely fucked, and being a parent these days, you just have even more things to worry about because technology doesn't seem to be on your side, neither really is the law. But that's a bigger topic for another day. Also, what's not included is Roblox chat, which should be, because a lot of fucking freaks and a lot of pedophiles hang out on Roblox for the reasons I just stated. Steam communities, I don't really know much about that. Pinterest, yeah, it's really just a picture sharing service site, I guess. I don't know if there's a communication aspect to that. I haven't used it enough. And education platforms, which is no surprise. So a teenager can't legally scroll through Instagram or Facebook anymore, but they can still hang out on Discord for hours and be influenced by freaks, sickos, pedophiles, and that weird cult that was using Discord to coerce minors into doing very inappropriate things. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look that up because I don't really want to get into it. Some more controversial apps that weren't included on the ban list include RedNote, Coverstar, Yope, Lemon8, and Bluesky, which we'll get into a bit later. And they are, I don't know a lot about them, but I know Bluesky is a pretty leftist-heavy social media site. So that also brings up the question, why wasn't that included on the ban list? Who the fuck knows? Maybe because it's new, or maybe because that's the narrative that the people in charge want younger people to interact with, so they can brainwash them into future voters or push a certain narrative. So this leads into the biggest question: how do platforms even know how old you are? And is age verification everything that it's cracked up to be? So we've all probably come across age verification online at some point. If you go to Dan Murphy's or BWS, you get asked what's your age, which is pretty easy to bullshit pretty much. You can just put any number in and press enter, and it lets you into the site because it wants your money and it wants you looking at what it's got to sell. But at the same time, there isn't really no check, and I mean, I don't really see how you can prove your age online like that unless you do. The government forces its citizens to adopt digital ID, which is probably not too far away. So how does age verification work? And as I just said, you can put any number in. A 16-year-old could go to the Dan Murphy's website and put in that they're 45 years old. There's no way to fact check the age of the person using the site, and this is the same for porn sites and many others. So age verification, the easiest method is birth date entry. You can, like I just said, you can bullshit it. You can make yourself out like you're 65. Age verification relies way too heavily on honesty, and no one's really that honest online. Yeah, some people are, but a lot of people lie on the internet. It's full of outliers and people who aren't who they say they are. There's millions of people that obviously play by the rules and do the right thing, but there's lots of scammers out there. So it is really surprising that I guess these sites probably had to bring in age verification, but they bring in age verification and there's literally no way you can fact check it, more or less. It relies 100% on honesty and integrity of the person putting in the age. And some age verification systems are even more relaxed and easier to get around than the birthday entry. Some of them you literally just press, I agree, I'm over 18 years old, enter. Which is really surprising because it seems to be the only corner of the internet that relies on honesty. I couldn't even buy fucking tickets for the Ed Sheeran concert the other day because I did eventually get them, but I had to log into my account and then I needed to authenticate the account, which sent a code to my email. My email I went to, I had two-factor verification. I logged into that, but then I needed to log into my second email to get the code to log into the first email to authenticate the ticket account to buy the ticket. I went into the second email. I put the password in. It didn't work, so I said, forgot password. Send me a code to change it. So then Google sends you a code. Well, you have to wait 48 hours to fucking change the code to change the password for the second email so you can get the code to access the first email to access the code to the ticket site. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. That's an example of when things can go completely like over the top and be such a pain in the ass and so ineffective that no one really wants to use the site to begin with, where other parts of the internet rely on the honor system. So another age verification method is facial and AI scans, and this one I do not like because I think this is invasion of privacy, and I don't trust AI with your facial scans, because if it has your facial scans, it can pretty much digitally recreate your image or your likeness and could use you in deepfakes or scams or anything else that could be used to access your bank accounts or personal information later on down the track. Facial AI scans also use selfie video, which I think is a massive invasion of privacy and is a massive overreach. AI estimates your age based on your facial structure. Obviously, if you've got a beard, then it probably knows you're of a certain age. However, even the AI-based facial scan systems aren't 100% accurate, and accuracy seems to drop off around 16 years old, which is the age in question relating to the social media bans. This is another quote from the government. "We know this law will not be perfect, implicit in the reasonable steps requirement." Well, I think we all know that the law is not perfect and it never will be, especially when it relates to social media. That came from legalaid.wa.gov. Method 3, ID upload. We've all probably used this one at some point, especially on some of the more secure sites. You have to upload a ID, which I don't like either, because that means whatever the site has your fucking ID. It has your driver's license, it has your date of birth, all that information. And I don't think it's much better than the AI one, except the AI one seems to rely more on accuracy and estimation. Well, this one actually has your ID. So method 3, the ID upload, this has a stronger verification, but as I just mentioned, it raises some very serious privacy concerns. And it's also easy to bypass because you can use a fake birthday, fake VPN, you could have a shared account, or you could get your older brother or sister to get verification for you. And you can also platform hop. So the internet was designed for anonymity, but governments are trying to retrofit identity onto it. And this is something I've noticed in the last couple of years with a lot of sites, especially accounts where you set up a shop or something, like I've had to do with my Etsy shop. I had to upload a ID, which I didn't really want to do, and you had to do a facial scan as well. So they took things to the next level. In the last 10 years, there's been a massive rise in security procedures online, and that's no surprising because everything's online, banking's online, you have to have passwords and not just the generic ones. You really have to put some thought into passcodes and phrases now, and all these different systems checks just to access your money or whatever it happens to be. This also fits into conspiracy theories as well, because a lot of people are saying we are willingly giving all this information out and the government has access to all of it. I was skeptical years ago when they brought in the digital, the digital medical records, and they wanted everyone to put their medical records online, and then one of the big providers got hacked because it just seems like the banks, the communication services like Optus and Telstra, and now even Audi Mobile and all these other sites do not give a fuck about security or your personal information. They're always getting hacked, there's always data breaches, and information is getting sold on the dark web. I mentioned this in a previous episode about my experiences with one of the big telcos in Australia, Optus. Millions of people were affected by that, and you can't buy a phone without passing 180 million points of fucking ID. You got to bring a birth certificate or a passport or something like that, and an ID, and they copy it and they store it and they don't seem to destroy it, which there should be. If the government was really serious about this, they should be mandating that these companies use the information to verify your identity, then they destroy it after 30 days. Or it has to be on a very, very secure offline archive or vault or something like that. But no, the government wouldn't do that because the government just seems to bring in systems that require more ID so they can harvest more of your personal information. Not like they already fucking know it. If you have a fixed address or you have a gas bill, They already know most of your information, and I know if you go to the post office, especially in Australia, a bill with an address on it is enough proof to prove who you are. An ID that matches the address, that's enough for you to collect the post or whatever it happens to be. And this is an official quote on enforcement standards. Platforms must take reasonable steps to prevent under 16s from having accounts. There's no requirement for perfect or full verification. That quote comes from the Australian government guidance. Where does the personal responsibility fall? Because the government loves to call out social media companies and tech companies, but like we just said, it's very easy to fake an account. And going back to my partner's daughter, they got an email from her high school saying that one of the year 8s has got an illegal TikTok account, and they obviously put in a fake ID or date of birth, and it's making its way around the school, which I kind of thought was funny because this is bound to happen. It was going to happen no matter how good these laws and bans were. Teenagers and kids are always going to find a way around things. And what does quote-unquote reasonable steps look like? What are they supposed to do? Send out fucking some undercover squad to make sure anyone they suspect of being under 16 is actually over 16? How do they actually enforce it? And like I've mentioned, they can ban a Trump supporter, or they can ban a political opinion, or a video, or an account. But can they really prevent anyone from under 16 years of age having an Instagram or a Facebook account? I'm pretty convinced that technology is around. They just don't want to use it because they want more accounts. The more young people have accounts, the more people who have accounts, the better for the company. It's a big business motto after all. But how do they take reasonable steps? From what I've seen so far, they have been taking some pretty reasonable steps. But if a couple of people slip through the cracks and do the wrong thing, that doesn't really fall on the responsibility of the social media platform. That falls on the responsibility of the person creating the account, or getting their brother to create an account, or even a parent. And there's a lot of those child and teenage influencers that were making a lot of money that had some pretty strong opinions about the social media ban, and rightfully so. I'd be pretty pissed off if I was in that position too. You can't tell me that those parents aren't going to try to get around that and get their influencer teenage child back up and running because it makes money. And that's the thing about YouTube, is YouTube's on the ban list. There's heaps of those child review toy channels and kid channels. I know there is YouTube Kids, so that's not on the ban, but there's a lot of teenage influencer YouTube channels and review channels. I've even seen like teenage guitar social media pages and YouTube videos where like there's one of these two brothers who are absolutely amazing metal guitarists were playing. So now they don't have a platform, and they were just literally just playing guitar in their bedroom. They were fucking great. And there was this one guy before the band when I started to really get back into guitar, and I was looking for lessons and tips on YouTube. I came across this guy. He was a younger guy, teenager, had a really great channel, great information, awesome player, and I guess now he doesn't have a channel. So all that time and effort building his community, building his page, has all just been taken away. And that's the thing the government doesn't really get into, is like how much time and effort goes into creating and building these pages and these platforms and followings. It's like it's all for nothing now because you're not old enough. But it is such a complex issue. I don't know if it is as easy as a blanket ban as the all ban easy government has brought into effect. I think it's a much more complex one. And like I always say, I'm not into black and white thinking. There's shades of grey to everything, and I think this is another example of a multi-layered and very complex issue. Now we come to the real conundrum of the under 16 social media ban, and that is the ability for under 18s to access porn sites, or the porn site age verification contradiction. As most of us would already know, adult websites must verify age 18 plus. This is done via ID, credit card, biometric checks, etc. But that's all good in theory, but in reality, most of these age verification checks aren't as sophisticated as the quote-unquote compliance of some of these big sites. It's basically the same age verification as BWS or Dan Murphy's or any type of shop that sells alcohol or cigarettes or cigars. You have to be of a certain age in order to enter, but it's the same age verification that most of the porn sites use. If you went to a site that sold tobacco or alcohol and you want to purchase it, you'd have to have a valid credit card, and you're not going to get issued a credit card unless you are 18 years old, or if you could pay with PayPal or something like that. So there's probably ways around it, but the fact that I haven't actually heard of anything like that and it hasn't been on the news, and you can still go, and you can go online and you can purchase a six-pack of beer or a whiskey or whatever, wine, whatever it is you drink. The fact that that's not on the news and it hasn't been shut down probably means that their system does work. Otherwise, we would have heard about it, and it would have been alcohol and tobacco shopping online would have been made illegal, and Dan Murphy's, BWS, you wouldn't be able to go onto their sites and purchase to either pick up or have delivered. So the key paradox with the age verification is teenagers could lose their Instagram before losing access to adult content depending on enforcement timelines, which is pretty fucked up because a teenager or young person can still access their favourite porn site, can log in and watch their favourite bukkake and gangbang videos, comment, interact in that cesspool of a community, search all manner of adult content, but they can't access Instagram or Facebook. So what is more damaging to a young person? Social media, a couple of nasty comments, maybe some inappropriate content here and there, or millions upon millions of adult videos in every taste and category. This really does make me think that if the government really did give a shit about the young people, it would probably try to do more to, I don't know, maybe block or make it harder for younger people to access those types of sites. But at the same time, it's also, we're living in this free society where millions of people go to porn sites every day for different reasons. Most of it is just harmless adult entertainment and fun, but there is a darker, more nefarious side to it. These sites make millions of dollars of revenue, and through data collection, subscriptions, advertisement sales, that type of thing, they're obviously the highest trafficked sites in the world, which is kind of fucked when you really consider what people's priorities are. They're not using the internet to educate themselves or better themselves, they're using it to jerk off to. That's about the state of Western society in 2026. So in a way, it is fitting. And that's why this issue is such a complex and difficult one to get right. Because by that definition, do we need checks for everyone that ever visits a porn site? So what if you have a consenting adult, he or she logs onto their favourite site once or twice, 4 or 5 times a week, whatever it happens to be, watches a few videos, it's all legal, it's all above board, it's nothing nefarious, it's just run-of-the-mill adult content. If they're of consenting age and they're old enough, what's the harm? Do we need to subject those people to invasive ID and personal information checks? Like the social media sites, if the porn sites were run better and they weren't so gross, if they weren't so mistrusting with people's information, if they were more legitimate and upfront about privacy policies and information collection, maybe those checks would be more warranted. But the fact that most of that information is probably going to get sold onto a third and fourth party that sells it onto a Prince of Nigeria scam, or it's going to be used for data collection, allegedly by some intelligence agencies around the world. Apparently that's been going on. They collect the information on people. They're even watching what you're watching through people's devices, which is fucking terrifying. So if there wasn't such a big invasion of privacy and these sites were more legitimate and more trustworthy and didn't look so fucking dodgy, maybe people could or would feel more comfortable logging in or doing some type of ID check. And I guess from these sites' perspective, they're putting the age verification on before you go into the site. You have to put your age in, but it's very easy to get around. On one hand, yes, they are complying with the government regulations, but at the same time, it's like, well, we don't want to limit people from coming to the site because That drives their revenue, it drives their business, and millions of people all around the world go to these sites every single day. So are we punishing one group of people because some young people can log on? And that is the conundrum with this whole question. But on the other hand, we've already banned them from social media, so why can't we do it for adult sites as well? Because the government seems to be very laxed in that department. They don't seem to care as much that kids can access adult content. It's more so the social media, because they're getting their news and their information, and they're being informed via social media. They're not getting that same type of influence through porn sites. Porn sites come with a whole lot of other problems. Porn addiction, a whole bunch of sexual disorders and mental health issues. But their opinions of the government and the world and everything else aren't being formed through adult sites. We can make the argument that it's raising a whole bunch of emotionally dead individuals that won't respect women or men or sex or anything else. They will start viewing people as sexual objects rather than individuals and start to recreate what they are seeing. That is a real documented phenomenon from too much exposure to adult material. I'm not sure if the same can be said for social media. And the more conspiratorial side of me says that these bans are more about blocking the opinions and counter-narratives that the people in charge, mainly Albanese's Labor government, don't want to be seen, because other governments haven't gone this draconian with the bans. And yeah, like I said, there is refinement. There is always management and refinement that all these sites and basically every industry in the world could go through to make things better, but they don't do it because of cost, or they can't be bothered, or they don't want to invest time and resources if they're not dragged by the government kicking and screaming in order to do so. It does seem like things are being pushed in a certain direction, and it doesn't seem to be a good one. The government always has knee-jerk reactions to any issue that has happened pretty much all throughout history. Albanese's government, as we've seen post-Bondi, brought into effect very draconian hate speech laws that really crack down on free speech. This is happening around the world, but Australia has really swung for the fences. Because it's not just hate speech, it's fear speech or fear-based speech. It's what was implied, it wasn't the intent or whatever the new laws fucking happen to say. We'll be covering that at some point, because there's already ad campaigns from New South Wales Police saying, if you've been a victim of hate crime or think you've been a victim of hate crime, you should dob in the perpetrator and call us, we want to know. It's like, you've got bigger fucking fish to fry. So all the cops are just going to be tied up with hate crime allegations, and that's going to go through the court. It's going to block up the court, and then the real criminals are going to be overlooked. As is one such case is in my partner's ex, who really should be in jail and shouldn't be around kids. This is the same court system that didn't think he was enough of a problem, given his very colourful history, and gave him chance after chance, and he just completely doesn't give a fuck about the court orders or the laws. But back to the hate speech laws. So this new ad campaign is encouraging people to be dobbers. They want us to dob our fellow Australians in because they think they might have been a victim of a hate crime. And it's just, I cannot believe a law was brought into effect so quickly. They dragged their feet on the Royal Commission. The Royal Commission is now in effect. They should have waited until after the findings of the Royal Commission to make any type of decision. But I know 5 weeks later, they rushed us through Parliament, and both sides of the fucking political divide both voted unanimously on it. So that's obviously being pushed from a third party. Because these laws are so vague and so interpretive, it is really the death of free speech. Because if you think you have been the victim of a hate crime, because this ad campaign I saw doesn't mention anything about proof. It's just like, if you think someone's been mean to you, dob them in, and we'll go fucking have a talk to them or arrest them. So start building the super fucking jails now, because half the country is going to be in jail before the end of the year. Cannot believe that this is what Australia has come to in the first few weeks of 2026 and the final couple of weeks of 2025. It almost looks like this was all planned, allegedly. if that's what we come down to, what is to stop anybody from making a hate crimes allegation against anybody else with absolutely no proof? Because this is exactly the same fucking thing the Me Too movement did. They went after anyone who was alleged to have done anything, and in most cases, the people that were accused of misdoings or a crime were proven to be innocent. Yeah, there's always the guilty parties like your Harvey Weinsteins and people like that, but people were just dobbing people in, mainly men, that they didn't like. Women were making complaints about, or he inappropriately touched me or said this, or I was sexually assaulted, which actually takes the focus off of people who are in that situation, who have been assaulted, etc. This is exactly the same thing, but done with free speech. I thought the hate speech laws were bad. I thought, yeah, we might be able to work within that framework of these new laws, but then they were like, well, we're getting rid of that because it's unpopular. Now let's double down and go, let's just call it fear speech, and any fear-based speech that causes any type of fucking fear. It's like, what fucking planet are we living in? Don't mention anything about the fucking threat of terrorism. It's always the far right, and the fact that we are living in very dangerous and precarious times. We're on the fucking edge of another global war, a World War III, I believe, is coming. Yet saying something that might be offensive or fear-invoking to someone is apparently a worse crime and worth more time in jail than the alleged pedophile principal who got 3 months. Look that up if you don't believe me. Got a little bit off topic, but back to it. So this is a quote from the e-safety industry codes relating to age verification for adult platforms. Adult platforms must implement appropriate age assurance measures. So what does that mean? As I outlined before, that's your basic run-of-the-mill stock standard age verification where it will say, I'm 18 years old, I can enter, or no, I'm not, exit. That's pretty much all that is. They're not exactly doing the best job of making sure people are of age before entering these platforms. And like everything, there's ways around it. There's bypass methods such as VPNs, overseas mirroring, or non-compliant platforms and sites, and encrypted browsers. So that doesn't work either. So now we come down to the conspiracy section of the podcast. This is my favorite section. The big questions we really need to look at: if these laws don't fully stop teens from accessing social media or potentially harmful sites, what will? And why now? And why this completely over-the-top approach? And as I mentioned before, the government always has these really overbearing knee-jerk reactions to everything. They never really deal with the source of the problem or the cause of an issue. It's always a overreaction to the reaction. Why do governments and companies and individuals act like this? Aren't we smart enough we can figure out what the root cause is? And as I alluded to before, is it a question of money and resources, or the lack of motivation to invest more resources into finding solutions? Is it easier just to keep the train on the tracks than to stop and deal with the leaking barrels of oil that the train is carrying? Because the problems I see aren't so much the social media platforms. Social media has its benefits and it has its downside. Benefits, it's great for running a business. It's pretty much free advertisement, or a very easy and cheap and effective way to get your name and your brand out there. It's good for promotion. It's good for making connections and following people that you're interested in, and other business leaders or actors, athletes, whatever it happens to be. The downside is it skewers people's worldview. It makes people very pessimistic. It gets people addicted to negativity, and the algorithm can create some mental health issues. It's often hidden online bullying. It can be used by criminal elements. It can be used for stalking. It can be used for manipulation, and much more. And I also think it is making people dumber, because we are just relying on getting information from not so much news services or news outlets, but from fuckwit, retarded internet influencers. And mass media, modern mass media has done this to themselves because they have been dishonest. They've lied about the causes of wars and world events, and refer to individuals like Jeffrey Epstein as a disgraced financier and not a sex trafficking pedophile freak. Mass media on a whole has lied for years, and I think they are starting to feel the squeeze because alternative voices are filling the void left by them. People like myself start podcasts. There's millions of other people who are on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook who have followings, podcasts, YouTube channels, whatever it happens to be, all telling their version of the truth. Social media platforms aren't the problem. Management and refinement are. If the social media platforms had a targeted Facebook or Instagram that aimed more for a teen audience, that had more fail-safes and more, restrictions on what people could see and more vetted content, maybe these laws wouldn't have had to come into play. But the fact that the tech companies just have ignored these issues for years because they make money out of it makes them as bad as the government. They have put these poisonous algorithms out into the world that feed off of negativity and reward people for engaging with negative content. They've put this out into the ecosystem because it was profitable for them, and now the government's cracked down, but we also have to ask ourselves, why is the government cracking down now? But the government never deals with the real core issues of the problem. Why are parents buying their kids' phones? Why haven't the schools done more to confiscate people's phones? Because I think there's a couple of schools in South Australia that have done that recently. I think it's one of the first states to confiscate students' phones or make them leave them in a locker or a box or something. But why wasn't that done a decade ago? As I mentioned in the opening of the show, mobile phones at schools are not a new thing. That guy that I used to go to school with who brought a phone, he wasn't allowed to bring it to class, he kept it in his locker. Not like anyone was ringing him anyway because he only had a couple of numbers and no one else had phones. So why weren't students made to keep their phones out of the classrooms and kept in the locker? Why wasn't there a box with a slot? You slide your phone in at the start of class and you get it at recess or lunch or end of the day. If the governments and these tech companies could get together rather than just butt heads and say, well, we're going to fine you $45 million if you don't comply, and the tech companies saying, yeah, fuck you, I'd like to see you try, that's small change for us, we're not going to change what we do. Maybe if the government reached an olive branch out to, the Elon Musks or Mark Zuckerberg and said, look, we want to come up with a solution, we don't want to ban kids, but can we make this a safer fucking ecosystem for young people so they can still interact? Because it undoubtedly is, whether you like social media or you don't, we can't deny it is part of most people's everyday life. It is a part of the world now. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. It's been around for a long time, and it's time that we learn to manage these problems. It's time we learn to manage these issues rather than just have a fucking blanket ban like the governments always do. Maybe we should have talked it out and debated the causes of Bondi and these hate speech laws before they were just fucking forced upon the country. And to my knowledge, some people have already been arrested and are facing 1 year in jail for hate speech. So let's have a look at some of the conspiracies around what could potentially be behind the social media bans. So theory one would be political timing. Like I've mentioned a dozen times on this episode, social media is nothing new. It's been around for, 15 to 20 years, maybe not 20 years, so say 15 years. Social media harms have been known since 2014. That's well over 10 years ago, so why all of a sudden in 2025, 2026 are the government banning young people from social media? And some people think it's a great thing. It is on the surface, but I just don't think it is going to do what the government and all the people that support it think it's going to do. Another well-known factor is the rising mental health rates among young people. I think these two reasons gave the government the perfect way to try to clamp down on social media, appear like they were doing the right thing, appear like they were protecting the youth. It gives them a visible win, and we all know that governments need and love to get a couple of wins under their belt and look like they're doing something in front of their voters. Theory two, this one's the bigger and more obvious one, is the state versus big tech. Social media is here to stay, but so are big tech companies, and we all know how powerful they've become in the last 20 years. They have become so powerful they can influence elections, they can literally shape or reshape a news or current events narrative. They can dictate social trends. They can make villains appear like heroes and heroes appear like villains overnight. So the second theory with the state versus big tech is the shifting power balance from national governments to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is arguably more powerful than most national governments around the planet. Maybe not so much in the Western world, but definitely in other parts of the world. The tech companies wield more power than most third and second world governments combined. They are more influential. They speak directly to the individual on the end of the phone or the computer. They're direct, they're powerful, and they're cheap. You don't need any think tanks or a council of lawyers or focus groups to tell you that this might resonate with 48% of the voters, but if you do this, you might resonate with 52% of the voters, giving you a 14% better chance at being re-elected at the next election. You can come up with a theory or an idea, put it out there via social media and have 1 million people view it within a week or overnight. But maybe the biggest reason to bring in these laws now, and when I heard about the government bringing these in, I wasn't surprised. Both sides of politics were going back and forth discussing the pros and cons, and it just seemed like the issue was going back and forth forever and nothing was really happening. Then all of a sudden they said they're going to bring it in. A couple of months go by, then they announced that it was going to be, I think the 3rd of December they're going to bring it in, or 10th of December. Yeah, I think the 10th of December 2025 was going to be officially brought in. And I thought the timing of this seems really strange, especially at the end of the year. They bring it in and then a couple of days later, Bondi happens. Now, I'm not saying the two events are connected in any way. This is just a conspiracy theory I'm spitballing. But it does seem that the timing is a little suspicious. The social media ban comes into effect. People start talking about it and debating whether it's good or not. And then all of a sudden, all that chatter about that stops and then the focus shifts to Bondi. Now, whether that's coincidence or not, I don't know. You can be the judge of that. Bondi happens. 2 days later, they're talking about bringing in hate speech laws. I don't believe in coincidence, and I don't think this is one. The timing does smell a bit fishy to me. So that brings up theory 3, digital identity and narrative control. So as we've already looked at, age verification is all of a sudden thrust upon the social media platforms. You have to prove that you're over 16 years old to access them. You combine that with the enforced deletion of accounts seemingly overnight. Anyone that was under 16 had their accounts deleted. What does that equal? Well, in a conspiratorial mind, that equals infrastructure for controlling what young people see, or rather, what young people aren't allowed to see anymore. I don't think that can be looked at really any other way. You can make the argument that it was to protect the young people from inappropriate content, but it also seems like they're trying to shield the next generation of voters from any alternative viewpoints relating to whatever government happens to be in control, and that happens to be the communistic regime of the Anthony Albanese government, also formerly known as Labor, which I am actually ashamed to say that I voted for. I believed that guy was going to make changes. I just didn't realise they were going to be for the worst. Digital identity and narrative control. This is a very contentious issue all around the Western world. Canada and England have cracked down on free speech. They have pushed this digital identity agenda. They want control. They want to silence any opinion to whatever bullshit the government is up to. They jail their citizens, especially in the UK, for liking Facebook or Instagram posts that might be deemed as controversial. There's more people in jail for thought crime in the UK than people that are in jail for speaking out about the so-called evil Putin regime in Russia. Go figure. It looks like Russia and China have more democratic freedom than the West does, or certain parts of the West anyway. I don't see how you can make a convincing counter-argument that this wasn't done to control what young people are seeing. Because these people are a couple of years away from voting, so 5 or 6 years they forget all the bad shit the government's done. They've stopped the information being pumped into their brains from alternative sources or quote-unquote conspiracy theorists, or as Mr. Albanese this week said, dark forces within the right or the far right. as he loves to blame. That's pretty much anyone that was considered conservative 10 to 15 years ago. In other words, the Labor government has gone completely totalitarian. They want to clamp down on people's freedom of speech, civil liberties. I don't know why. Are they being pushed by some other agenda? Are they being pushed by allegedly a George Soros-like character, or the Illuminati, or whatever you want to call it? Because it does seem like the hate speech laws were already planned and drafted and just lying around somewhere waiting for an excuse to be used. And that just happens to coincide 3 or 4 days after the social media ban is brought into effect. And the government always likes to use quote-unquote safety as the reason they're doing this, because young people are so impressionable. The amount of young people I have met, although they might seem like retards on the surface, they are distracted by other things, and they are a little less empathetic than I think previous generations. They're a bit more sarcastic because they've grown up in a world that's just been full of lies and bullshit. They are a lot smarter than I think a lot of people, especially the governments of the world, give them credit for. This is a generation that's grown up inside of social media and the internet, and they've adapted to it. They are seeing the bullshit, and I think governments globally are very wary that they are getting counter narratives and counter arguments to the mainstream narratives that the government and mass media push out onto all of us. I think the boomer generation, just for what I've seen personally, believe pretty much most of what they see on TV. Not everyone, obviously. My generation is skeptical. We're the generation that's gone through 2 never-ending wars, terrorist attack, the Patriot Act, and all that other bullshit. We've gone from the end of the analog age into the start of the digital age, into the start of the internet revolution and social media age, now to streaming. So we're not fooled by a lot of this bullshit either. There are certain generations that are, and this is the way governments have acted in the past, is they do control the narrative via the most mass media way possible. And this is exactly the same shit the Nazis and the communists did. This is straight out of Joseph Stalin and Vladimir Lenin's playbooks, which you can hear more about on The Light of Communism. Parts 1 and 2 are available now. This is just a way for governments to claw back some control that they have lost to the big tech companies over the past 10 to 15 years. They want control because, as we all know, governments should fear their people. People should never fear their government. And it seems like the government is scared of something, especially the Albanese government. I've never seen a political leader go from one identity to another. He's, 2 years into the job, 2.5, whatever it happened to be. I can't remember when he got to power, but he's been in power for a while. Labour was always very woke. Albanese was always very woke. And then the Palestine-Israel conflict kicked off. He didn't do enough to protect certain communities, as I've outlined in detail in the Bondi Massacre Parts 1 and 2. So I won't go into that again. But it seems like they've lost a lot of control. They are very scared of losing power, where their votes are coming from. They want to import voters rather than gain voters' trust. Because I'm not voting for them again. I made that mistake once. It's not going to happen twice. And I think they are very scared that the people are waking up, which makes me think, who the fuck's paying you? Who's controlling the government? Who's controlling the presidents? Who's controlling the prime ministers? If they're scared of the people waking up, what are they scared of the people waking up from? That you've been lying to us for the past 100 years, that all this, our quote-unquote reality is actually fucking bullshit. This isn't the way human beings should be living. Why is Australia the most overtaxed country in the fucking world? Why do we have a housing shortage? I mean, like I've said before, I'll probably never be able to afford a home. Definitely won't be now after dealing with that narcissistic fuckwit for 3 years. But what hope do young people have? And the generation after me and the generation after that has been born into this internet social media age where alternative voices and views and opinions, counter narratives are at their fingertips and they're updated nearly hourly. They're growing up with access to multiple sources on current events, global trends, anything that's happening socially or culturally. They're getting access to it from multiple sources, from multiple voices with multiple opinions, and the government doesn't like that. You can argue with me with that if you want, but you need to bring a pretty strong argument to the table to convince me otherwise. And this links back to Bill C-63, which I covered a couple of years ago, the Canadian Online Harms Act, and this reflects global trends of regulating content for, once again, quote-unquote, safety. If most young people find out about the world through these apps and platforms, removing or controlling access isn't just about screen time, it's controlling the story they get to hear and see. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I think Orwell was right. Orwell isn't a cautionary tale anymore. It's becoming policy. It's becoming part of everyday life, unfortunately. Now, sticking with Orwell for a second, let's move on to Theory 4, cultural panic and Orwellian control. Previous media like TV, video games, movies, music has all been controlled in some way or another, and yes, rightfully so. Yeah, some things are too violent for younger people, some things are too offensive. You don't really want under 16s playing Grand Theft Auto, probably not the most appropriate game. It is designed for adults after all, just happens to be popular. I remember being in a game shop and this kid was looking at Grand Theft Auto 5 and the mum's like, oh, I don't know if I should get that. And she turned around and asked me, she's like, is this appropriate for him? I said, no, treat the rating. I said, the games are all rated. Treat the ratings like movies. If you wouldn't let him watch an MA movie, don't buy him an MA video game. In the case of Grand Theft Auto, it was R. I said, if you're not going to let him watch an R-rated film, definitely don't buy him it. It's very violent. But now this Orwellian control has been extended to the internet and now social media. Especially in the Western world, governments and lawmakers are pitching these new laws, or should I say, they're marketing these new laws as protection. But it's also a way for the government to curate approved narratives. For example, the Labor government controls or curates the approved official governmental narrative, and it pushes the official version of what they want you to see onto the masses, especially young voters that don't know anything about politics. Probably, for the most part, most kids probably couldn't give a shit about politics unless you're really one of those kids that is really interested in politics and goes into politics really, really young. I think those kids need a life, to be honest, but each to their own. So that's a way to control or to get your version, your narrative, quote, your truth, into the minds of impressionable, undecided future voters. Same shit the Bolsheviks did, same shit all these totalitarian governments have done over the centuries. I think why the Western world is finding it so hard to deal with, it's the first time in really Western civilization that it's becoming very apparent what the government is up to. This approved narratives, the Orwellian control, the silencing and mediating of the internet. And yet, look, we can all agree that there's things on the internet that probably shouldn't be seen by anybody. Like, it probably does need to be, maybe not mediated, but it needs to be regulated. It needs to be managed. I'll call it managed. It needs to be managed and refined in a way that it is a better experience for everybody, because it's too easy to access porn or inappropriate material for pretty much anybody, but especially for underage users. And, the government, like I said, they love to use quote-unquote protection, or we're trying to protect the children from this and that, as a way of them implementing these laws. But it's really just, yes, that's probably one legitimate reason the government's bringing it in, but I think the real reason is to control the narrative. It's to curate these approved messages from the government, because I think they realised the internet was much more powerful than any of them gave it credit for, because it seems like the government, and especially a certain generation, that just completely disregards the power of the internet, where I was skeptical years ago, but since I've been podcasting and doing a lot more shit online, I've realized how powerful a force the internet actually is. It's a remarkable tool if it's used right. That's in the eye of the beholder. You can use it any way you like, really, but that's your freedom to choose. But let's also not forget that in other countries like North Korea, parts of Africa, Russia, Iran, the Middle East, the government does control the internet. It does control what you can access and what you can look at. social media sites are banned in most non-Western countries. And that's not a coincidence. It's because the government and the people in control do not want you to have alternative views, because if you know what the rest of the world is like and how they think, the government could be in real trouble. It might start off with 1 or 10 people saying, what the fuck's this president talking about? The rest of the world's not like this. I'm hearing this side of the story. I'm hearing this counter argument. I think this guy might be wrong. Now, 1 to 10 people is controllable, but if that is multiplied by 10,000 people, 1 million people, 10 million people, 100 million people, then the government has a real fucking problem. They have to maintain order and control via controlling the internet, and then if that doesn't work, like we've seen in Iran, where they did turn off the internet in large parts of the country, the people started to rise up and fight the government back, and then the government killed 10,000 of its own people to maintain control, and this is still an ongoing situation. So that is the most extreme version of what happens when governments and the people butt heads based on the draconian, medieval-like control the government has over the people. So if platforms go down and the government shapes what kids see and believe, that's digital George Orwell in action. And Orwell obviously didn't account for the internet, but I think he was right. I just think he was way too early. If he had named his book 2025 or 2026, he would have been right on the fucking money. And let that sink in. If platforms go down and the government shapes what kids and future voters see and believe, that is digital Orwell in action. So this brings us to Bluesky. Bluesky is not on the official ban list. Doesn't mean it might not be later on, but at the time of recording, the 20th of February 2026, Bluesky is not currently on the official ban list because it just falls outside the criteria used by the regulator. I don't see how it's really any different from Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. So if you don't know, Bluesky is a social media platform very similar to X, formerly Twitter, but it's built around a different idea of decentralized control instead of one company controlling everything. Okay, interesting. Bluesky is a micro-blogging social network where users can post short messages similar to tweets, share images and links, follow accounts, reply and repost. So basically a stock standard social media platform. On the surface, it feels very much like Twitter was in the early days. The difference is how it is built underneath. The core idea of Bluesky is decentralization. So most social media platforms are centralized. In other words, they're run by one company or one owner. One company owns the servers, one company controls moderation rules, one algorithm decides visibility, one company can bear or restrict accounts globally. Now, Bluesky is trying to change that. It runs on something called the AT protocol, Authenticated Transfer Protocol, which aims to allow different servers, quote-unquote instances, to exist, users to move accounts between providers, custom moderation systems, multiple algorithms users can choose from. So in theory, you can control your identity more so than the platform does. In other words, you don't have to follow Instagram or Twitter's algorithms in order to get found. So if you think of email is decentralized, Gmail, Outlook, Proton Mail, they all work together. Twitter X is centralized. Bluesky is trying to be more like a social media version of email. Now, if you don't know already, Bluesky was originally created inside of Twitter by Jack Dorsey, the co-founder and former CEO of Twitter, until it was taken over by Elon Musk. So in 2019, Dorsey announces Bluesky as a research project funded by Twitter. The goal was to build an open standard for social media. In 2021 and 2022, it becomes an independent company. 2023 launches invite-only beta. In 2024, it opens publicly and grows rapidly as users look for alternatives to X. Jack Dorsey is no longer on the Bluesky board, though, as of 2024, so it has changed hands since then. So many users joined Bluesky because they wanted less algorithm manipulation. And yeah, look, I think that's a pretty valid reason. I fucking hate algorithms. I just hate how you have to cater your entire fucking life around them. Journalists, artists, tech companies, and podcast creators were all early adopters of Bluesky. Bluesky represents a bigger experiment. Can social media exist without one corporation controlling public conversation? That's a pretty interesting question, I think. It's part of a broader push to decentralize tech, user-controlled platforms, open social networks. Whether it exceeds long-term is still up in the air. Decentralization is technically harder and slower to scale. And that's interesting. Can we and should we have decentralized social media? Maybe that is where some of the answers lie for the under 16 social media ban and making social media a better, more friendly place. Who the fuck knows? It is interesting. So it'd be nice if Instagram or someone like that could maybe experiment with a more decentralized social media. But that is very interesting because Facebook and Instagram and these podcast platforms, the algorithms are just a fucking pain in the ass, as I outlined earlier in the show. You were just completely marching to their drum, trying to jump through hoop after hoop just to try to get some type of notoriety. And then you get I'll get all these bullshit spam emails. I'm so-and-so from fucking podcast promotion world. I liked episode 91, but it's getting lost in the algorithm because it's not optimized for SEO or some fucking bullshit. So yeah, fuck off. There might be some truth in those scam emails, but the big problem is we are just completely beholden on these bullshit fucking algorithms. And that's something I would really love to change right throughout the internet. But I've heard a lot of controversial things about Bluesky. I've heard that it's owned by leftists, it's full of pedophiles and freaks, and it pushes very hard left narratives and influences. So is there any truth to this? Bluesky sits right in the middle of culture war narratives right now. The platform itself isn't officially political, but its current user base leans left politically. So that turns out to be actually true. What actual research shows? A Pew Research study found adoption on Bluesky is much higher among left-leaning news influencers. 69% of left-leaning influencers joined, only 15% of right-leaning influencers did. Studies analysing shared links found over 60% of links shared point to left-leaning sources, about 8 to right-leaning sources. Academic research describes Bluesky user base as politically homogeneous and predominantly left-leaning. Why that happened? It wasn't designed that way. It happened because many liberal users left X after ownership and political changes, i.e. the Musk era. Early adopters shape culture on any new platform. Social media tends to cluster like-minded communities. The accurate framing is, yes, Bluesky does have a left-leaning community presence, but it's not quote-unquote a leftist platform by design. It just seems to have been adopted that way. So, what about the freaks and the pedos? This is where the online claim gets distorted. Reality, yes, like every large social media platform, illegal users attempt to join, but there is no credible evidence Bluesky uniquely hosts or tolerates pedophiles. So there's no sexual content involving minors and non-consensual or exploitative material, but what does that actually mean? So you can have porn on it if it's consensual or if it's legal? What does that actually mean? Because it doesn't sound like it's that much better than X if it is just another social media site that accepts deviants, OnlyFans creators, and pornographic material. The company has been tightening moderation enforcement and removing accounts more aggressively. Research tracking early growth found suspicious or harmful accounts were flagged and suspended, indicating active moderation. Every major platform has the same issue: X, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Discord. The internet itself attracts bad actors, presence, and endorsement. But that doesn't mean that presence is endorsed. Most viral claims online come from screenshots without context, ban users claiming censorship, political attacks between platform communities. There's no verified reporting showing Bluesky is unusually permissive compared to competitors. The real controversies around Bluesky. Here are the actual debates happening. 1. Liberal echo chamber criticism. Some critics, including public figures, argue the platform lacks ideological diversity. Example, entrepreneur Mark Cuban said that the platform risks becoming politically one-sided and hostile to dissent. Very true. Common complaints, conservative views receive pushback. Supporters responded, users can choose custom feeds and moderation filters. Some platforms always start culturally narrow. Bluesky gets criticism from opposite directions simultaneously. Some say moderation is too strict. Others say it's too slow or inconsistent. Activists have complained about accounts being wrongly flagged as spam. That paradox means moderation systems are still evolving. Free speech versus safety debate. Bluesky allows community moderation lists, custom feeds, decentralized identity. People argue over whether this creates healthier spaces or ideological filtering bubbles. I'd say both. The debate is ongoing and unresolved. Bluesky right now is smaller than X, politically left-leaning demographically, still experimenting with moderation under heavy cultural war scrutiny. It's not officially leftist, uniquely dangerous, proven to host more illegal content than other platforms. It's a young platform whose culture is forming during a politically charged migration period. Interesting. So if it fits all the hallmarks and characteristics of social media, and it does have this open discussion, why isn't it on the official Australian government's ban list? Well, I'm going to tell you. So why Bluesky isn't on the official list? The age restriction rules define, quote, social media platforms by features like algorithmic content feeds, networking, and interactive public posting structures. And the regulator has so far focused on major platforms with large user bases and clear social network functions. Bluesky, while social, is smaller. It is smaller, and its status hasn't been formally designated in the rules. That might be so, but it is still obviously a social media network, and yeah, it might not have the same algorithmic content feeds as the bigger platforms. It's less centralized, as we've seen, and it's moderated differently. That doesn't mean it's going to be any better. What's to stop the under 16s who've had their accounts deleted on Instagram and Facebook jumping ship and going to Bluesky, then turning it into the same thing as Instagram and Facebook? Because they could still be radicalized or influenced or have narratives shaped for them on Bluesky. Just because the algorithm doesn't work the same doesn't mean it's not as harmful in the long run. Like we've seen, it's a pretty new platform, and it's going to take a couple of years before any type of real data for or against Bluesky really comes to light. So Bluesky voluntarily introduced age checks in Australia. Independent reporting shows that Bluesky began requiring age verification for Australian users in December of 2025. Interesting, even though it wasn't officially required to comply under the ban. Interesting. Bluesky may be acting cautiously to avoid regulatory problems. Now, are they doing this out of the goodness of their heart, or are they trying to, cover something up? I don't know. Maybe they are a different social media beast altogether, but as we've seen so far, these companies don't really do anything for the good of the people. But it isn't obligated by law to block under 16 accounts like the other banned platforms are. The official under 16 media ban doesn't include Bluesky, at least not yet. This is based on the government's specified list of age-restricted platforms that must comply with the law starting December 10, 2025. Some platforms like Bluesky have voluntarily implemented age checks in Australia, but that's their choice. The government didn't put them on the official list. This is where narrative control comes back into it. This is exactly the sort of policy gap critics point to. Regulators name a handful of platforms, but others operate under the radar and still end up voluntarily tightening controls. That raises questions about how the list is built and who decides what counts as quote-unquote social media. The platforms officially required to comply with Australia's under 16 social media ban are Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, X, Threads, Reddit, Twitch, Kick, and YouTube. Bluesky is not on that list. It simply hasn't been designated under the law's criteria yet. Interesting. So there you go. That's why Bluesky isn't on the list. So I'm going to read a series of government quotes so you can make up your own mind whether you think the social media ban is a positive or a negative. These are all official government quotes from verified sources, whereby the government tries to explain and justify bringing this ban into effect. So number one, aim of the law is, as we've seen before, to quote-unquote protect young people. The aim of this ban is to protect young people from design features that encourage them to spend too much time on screens and show them content that can be harmful to their health and well-being. In other words, it's content that might help them shape a different opinion to the narrative the government wants to push on its people. To protect young people from design features. Like I said, management and refinement, maybe you should be putting pressure on the social media companies to change the design and algorithmic features. Maybe if the social media companies said, yeah, we can comply with that, we'll come up with a new algorithm that's fairer and gives a less biased feed of ideas to young people. And maybe we'll put some type of time feature on there that limits the amount of time young people can spend on devices, on social media. Maybe that would have been a better way to go. Maybe they can only spend 20 minutes a day and they have to make more targeted decisions of what they're choosing to look at rather than just doom scrolling pointless morons dancing and influencers and a bunch of other pointless shit. Maybe a time-based algorithm would have been the compromise both parties could have agreed on. The social media companies get to keep their younger customers and the government doesn't have to ban the platforms. Maybe that would have been better for the health and well-being of young people. So that quote is from experts summarising the government's position, told the Australian Science Media Centre the aim of the ban is to protect young people from harmful content and over-engagement on screens. That's from eSafety. So number 2, quote, platforms must take responsible steps. Social media companies are required to take, quote, responsible steps to prevent under 16s from having accounts on their platforms. That comes from the Australian government's online safety guidance. Number 3, government describes privacy/verification reality. From eSafety Commissioner Julie Inman Grant during a media briefing. Quote, one of the scare tactics we've already seen is every platform is going to have to age verify. They, of course, don't want to do that because that is going to create a lot of friction and a lot of inconvenience. We think it would be unreasonable if platforms re-verified everyone's age. Unreasonable, but you want them to bring it in, but then it's unreasonable if platforms re-verified everyone's age. Yes, maybe that's true, but we've already given that information. They should already know it. They should already know what accounts aren't. They should already know what accounts are and aren't of age to be on the platform. They should already have that information. You can't tell me they can't come up with an algorithm or a program that could have done that work for them. It just seems like they think it's going to be too hard and there's going to be too much friction and pushback from the social media companies, so let's just ban it. That was quoted in the AAP 9 News coverage of the ban explain age verification challenges. 4. Law is not perfect. Enforcement implication, indirect official acknowledgement. While there isn't a direct, quote, we know it won't work, quote from ministers in mainstream press, an expected limitation can be referenced directly from official guidance. The laws require platforms to take reasonable steps, not guaranteed perfect enforcement. This is the legislative standard set in the Online Safety Amendment Social Media Medium Age Act itself. So this is the government describing privacy and verification reality. From eSafety Commissioner Julie Inman Grant during a media briefing. So these are quotes from independent expert and third-party quotes. 5. Critics say regulation should be more than a ban. Rather than banning children and young people from social media, the government should regulate and enhance the protection of children's privacy and personal data while prioritising their human rights. Yeah, similar to what I was saying, why don't they look at that rather than just a blanket ban? And that comes from Amnesty International, slammed the ban, saying Australia should regulate privacy and algorithmic profiling instead of banning kids. Can't say I disagree. So now we come down to the quote from Prime Minister Mr. Anthony Albanese himself. Number 6, Prime Minister's comments about the impact. From Reuters coverage of the law's commencement. Quote, this will make an enormous difference. It is one of the biggest social and cultural changes that our nation has faced. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on the social media ban taking effect. That comes from Reuters. So, what do you think? Do you think these laws are going to work? Do you think they're going to fail? Do you think they're positive? Do you think they're negative? Do you really think they have the quote-unquote young people's protection in mind? Or do you think there is some more nefarious narrative control, Orwellian censorship angle at place? Are you a supporter? Do you think this is about protection, accountability, and mental health? Or are you a critic? Do you think it's technically unenforceable? Do you think young people just go to other apps with less stringent age restriction policies? Do you think privacy is at risk? Or that this is some type of soft censorship? So what do you think? In my own opinion, I think the government is massively overreaching the way they always do. I think it's another knee-jerk reaction to a situation they don't really fully understand, or they're not willing to look at properly because it's too complicated and they just don't want to invest the time, money and resources into doing so, and waiting around years to find out an answer which may or may not happen while that particular government is still in power. In this case, it's the Labor Party. They want to be seen as being proactive and doing something. They want to get wins on the board. They want to appear like they're doing something in the public interest. But I think it's more sinister than just quote-unquote protecting the youth. I think there's a much larger censorship angle to all of this. They want to control narratives. They want digital ID to be brought in. They want to be able to control what people think, what they feel, who they vote for. And they don't want future voters voting the wrong way. These kids are probably going to be very on the fence when they're old enough to vote. This is something that's happened with a lot of young people. A lot of young people just see through the lies of both parties. They see them both as lies. It's not like the older generations where you're either for Labor or for the Liberals and you didn't really change. Yeah, there were some swing voters. Some people went both ways, but there's a lot of people that were very set in their ways. They were either a Labor supporter or a Liberal supporter. It's like a football team. You don't really change once you've adopted the culture of one. But the younger generations definitely seem to be more on the fence. They seem to be seeing through the lies and the bullshit of the government. They're not as gullible. They don't believe the drivel that comes out of a lot of politicians' mouths. So I think that could also be one of the reasons the government wants to try to buy back some control from the social media companies, because they see them as the biggest threat to their control, more or less. They want to control the narratives that are pushed on these platforms, and it won't just stop at social media either. It will be the entire internet if the government could have its way, if they could figure it out and spend the time and money in doing so. I wouldn't be surprised if there was even further crackdowns relating to podcasts and even YouTube videos in the future. I can definitely see podcasts being cracked down on, because that is really the last bastion of free speech, that and books. Books can be controlled and censored. Podcasts are so independent and run by so many individual creators, it's very hard to control that space. So I think they'll probably put pressure on Spotify and the big podcasting platforms to do the same thing in the future, have age verification or stop young people from listening to it, so that they don't give them alternative ideas and narratives to follow. Then if that doesn't fail, they'll start to crack down on social media, YouTube, and podcasts even further, I think. To close this out, I really think this comes down to a question of intention versus execution. Intent versus execution is one thing, but the broader picture is much bigger than that. Governments are starting to shape the narrative at scale. The internet and social media especially is the number one target. It's the platform, it's the vessel that provides the counter-narrative to the official narrative. And like I mentioned, there's lots of unswayed young voters out there who are forming their political ideas, opinions, and worldviews based on what they can see and access via social media every day. And unfortunately, I don't think teenagers will notice it at this very minute, but years from now, they'll start to realize how much of their worldview was really curated. And I think that is the most dangerous and concerning part of this whole very complex issue. If you have your world view or your experience curated, that's the version of events you're going to stick with. And I don't think the government or anyone has the right to curate anyone's access to news, worldviews, current events, opinions, narratives, or anything else in between. The government can fuck right off. And that's where we really have to ask the question, is this really about protecting kids, or is it about shaping what they see, know, and ultimately what they believe, and who they'll end up voting for? And that brings us to the end of the show. A very big thank you to everyone who stuck around and listened to the end. If you'd like to support the Truth Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Head on over to the Facebook and Instagram page, give them a follow and a like. Speaking of Instagram, don't be afraid to come on over to the Instagram page. Like my posts. Drop your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to know what you think. Don't be afraid to show me some love. You can download and listen to your favorite episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, YouTube, Podbean, Pandora, Stitcher, Castbox, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. Tell your friends, to your family, tell anyone you think might like the show. Help spread it around and get the Truth Tank out there. If you have some free time, why don't you leave the Truth Tank a 5-star rating and review? Every review helps the show get found. As I've outlined in this show, I'm fighting the fucking algorithm. It's been very hard to grow over the last couple of years. So if you'd like to see the Truth Tank grow, don't be afraid to give me some support. Give me a couple of 5-star reviews. I'd be much appreciated. It helps get this show to a bigger audience, and that's what we're all fighting against, is this poisonous fucking algorithm. If you want to go even further than that, support the Truth Tank, head on over to the official Truth Tank merchandise store over on Etsy and get yourself some Truth Tank merchandise. You can pick yourself up the Truth Tank t-shirt, the official Truth cap, or my personal favorite, the Truth Tank tank top. A big thank you to everyone who listened to the end. I appreciate everyone who listens, and I'll be back in the next couple of weeks with a brand new episode. Next episode should be The Lie of Communism Chapter 3. Unless something else pops up in between, who knows what the fuck's going to happen in the world now. There'll probably be another horrific global event, or another war start soon, or another ban in Australia. Free speech will be further crushed. Who the fuck knows? It's going to be a very interesting year, that's to say the least. But a big thank you to everyone who listened to the end. I'll be back in the next couple of weeks. But until then, I'm a Tank. This is the truth. Truth to tell.